Jarrod Kimber and Steve Harmison are alongside me, and what we thought we'd do was have a look at the England squad and how each individual player has performed. There have obviously been a number of highlights and significant highlights for England, and that can happen in a 5-match series that you lose 4-1, which England are likely to do. So let me begin, if I may. Let's go through it in batting order, and there are 3 or 4 players in the squad who aren't playing today: Rian Ahmed, Ollie Robinson, Jack Leach and Dan Lawrence, who hasn't played a test match. But otherwise, the England top 7 has remained unchanged for all 5 test matches. So let's begin with the openers then. Harmy, let's start with you. Zach Crawley and Ben Duckett, and as the Americans would say, stock up or stock down? Have they improved their reputations and their standing within the team, or have they declined, in your opinion? Ben Crawley.
Ben Crawley.
Ben Crawley.
Yes.
Zach Crawley and Ben Duckett.
Yeah, Zach Duckett. Yeah, I think their stock's up. I think they've come into this series. I think Zach Crawley's question mark on him in this series because of playing spin, and I think he'd kick himself going home. I think that both of them, I think their stock's up, but I think he'd kick himself going home. He's had a 76, a 73, a 42, a 60, and a 79. Not had 100. I think one thing I will say about going to India, going to this part of the world, facing good spin on turning pitches, hot pressurized conditions, you've got to take responsibility. So as much as he stocks up, and it is very, very high off the back of a good Ashes and this, he'd be disappointed he didn't get 100. And I think that is, for me, throughout this whole batting unit, that's my biggest stick I'll hit them with, which is nobody's really gone on and took responsibility and got hundreds, and there's been batting collapses because somebody's in, giving their wicket away, and open the floodgates for 3, 4, 5 wickets to go in a short space of time. So both of them stock up. I think they've proved that they can play in this environment. I think they've proved that they can play spin reasonably well, and I think in the partnership they've had 50 partnerships on many occasions, which for me means England are getting off to decent starts.
Yeah, I think stock up for both of them. Certainly as a partnership, stock up. I think Crawley's case, he might look back on this series as being one where he had a chance to actually improve his batting average a lot more with so many starts. They probably had the advantage of the fact that India kept trying 2 seamers against them early on, when if they tried spinners early on, I don't know, maybe that's something to go forward. I think Duckett, it's a bad time to be talking about him because of the shot today. But I think Duckett is still, all things considered, did slightly better on this series than I thought he would have, and Crawley did a lot better. So I think they're both in the plus. At least you can bring him back to Asia again without any issues, right?
Well, is it just my impression, or have there been a slight role reversal amongst the two of them, with Zach Crawley now playing the grown-up?
Maybe. It might just be the way that the wickets work as well. But Crawley's always been a little bit slower than Duckett, hasn't he?
Yeah, I think he has. I don't think India have bowled very well at Zach Crawley. I think they've had a plan, and I don't think it's worked. I think they've had a plan to bowl outside of stump and make him leave it, and thinking that he will go after one eventually. But I think the follow-up ball has been too straight. They've let him score freely through the leg side, and I think they will say, well, that's how we were looking to bowl at him. But fair play to him, his balance has been good. His head position's been really good in this series, and I think because of that, he's hit balls more through straight mid wicket than he has done through square leg. And whenever he's hitting balls through square leg, he's in trouble, because the corner, the angle of the bat, front pads in play, plant, and I think his second movement, if we're going to get into a technical part, his second movement's been very good. He's moved first and then gone again, where sometimes in England he plants his front foot stuck, and his hands get out accordingly, and I think because of that he gets out accordingly. So I think my only thing about Zach is he hasn't gone on. He hasn't gone big. He's done very, very well, but he hasn't gone big. I think Duckett's been more proactive when it comes to the sweep, the reverse sweep, and putting the bowler under pressure. Especially the beauty about this partnership is I think Zach's faced the seamers very, very well, and I think Ben Duckett, when the spin bowlers have opened to bowl him, I think Ben Duckett has played them well enough to get them out of the attack, whether it's be sweep or reverse sweep.
All right, let's talk about the engine room then, because it has spluttered. I mean, there have been moments of extreme brilliance, but 3-4-5 has spluttered. Johnny Bairstow, I think, has made 6 scores between 25 and 39, so he's made lots of starts without doing anything significant. Joe Root, I think, would be disappointed. Depends what he does today, but he's still going to be disappointed because England almost certainly lose 4-1. But much like he did 3 years ago, Joe Root's made 100 and very little else. And so Ollie Pope's 196, very little else. Joe Root's 100, not much else. Johnny Bairstow, lots of starts. That's been a massive problem for England, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, they're all down, aren't they? Realistically, I mean,
Joe Root stock's down.
I think he is, only because if you remember what happened in India last time, he made all those runs in Sri Lanka, then he made the runs against India in the first test, and we were saying he might be the best player of spin in the world. He's not. He doesn't feel like that anymore, does he? He doesn't feel at that level. He looked confused at times. There was that shot against Ashwin, I mean, forgetting the one against Bumrah as well. I think a lot of it might have been that his hands are sore, his back was sore, he's tired from all that bowling. But right at the moment, he didn't have the kind of impact that we thought, considering these are much better pitches to bat on than last time. Pope made 100, big 100. And no matter how you look at it, he's averaging 31.5 from this series. And by the end of the series, Harmison just said it was the worst innings from a number 3 he's almost ever seen, right? So we watched that, and it didn't look particularly good. And Bairstow, I thought, saw the ball pretty well at times in this series, but just looked like he was never going to stay in all that long. So I would say all 3 of them look slightly down. Probably Stokes I would only have slightly down. Pope I have real questions on outside of that one innings. And Bairstow, I'd be interested to see if what Bairstow's future is, but specifically whether they want to play him in Asia again.
I was only going 3-4-5. We're going to come on to Stokes after that. The engine room is what I call 3-4-5, Harmy.
Yeah, I think Joe Root will be disappointed with his return from this series. I don't think anybody needs to tell Joe that. I think he's realistic enough to know that he hasn't got the volume of runs he would like. I don't think the bowling's helped him. I don't think him having to bowl as many overs as he's had to bowl, and the responsibility of that has helped him. But knowing Joe, the person, Joe will understand looking at himself in the mirror going, I come away with 5 test matches. I should score more runs, and I should have had more runs. So I don't think he needs anybody to tell him. And I don't buy the, getting out reverse sweep and running down the wicket and hacking one up in the air. Who are we to tell Joe Root what shot to play and what shot to pick? And I think the execution was probably wrong, not the actual shot itself, the mindset of what he's trying to do. So, there are people out there saying Joe should just bat his way. Well, that is Joe's way. Joe has always been somebody, so many countless times when you hear people say about a great Joe Root innings, you look up at the scoreboard and all of a sudden he's 30. Well, more often than not, he's 30 off 35 balls. And that's where this team want to play. Joe just did it differently. He singles, he never had too many dot balls. And I think he'd be disappointed off that. The Ollie Pope one is he's got 119 runs in 9 innings. 119 runs in 9 innings away from that 196. Can't take that 196 away from him. It was a brilliant innings. It got England into a match-winning position, and then they got themselves over the line. I think.
So he's got 196 and an average of 20.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that's and I think his innings, when I said it's probably one of the worst I've seen from a number 3. If you take the 19, if you just look at every ball from on a camera behind the action and not see where the ball's gone, or not see in the old-fashioned way where you had that on the side screen, and you watch somebody's technique, I'd be amazed if anybody thought that was a technique of somebody batting at number 3 in international cricket. And I say this with all due respect, because I think Ollie Pope is a wonderful talent. I don't think he's a number 3. I said this to Bats the other day. I think he's a 4 or 5 or possibly a little bit lower. But he was never balanced when he was at the crease. He was always on the move. I mean, his hands. He played one ball where his hands were so far away outside of his body, and not front outside of his body. It was sideways outside of his body, and he's still trying to hit it with a straight bat back down towards the bowler. that 23 balls looked like a scrambled brain. And where England go with Ollie Pope, I'm not so sure. I'm not saying I drop him. I just might need a rethink of where he bats in the order he bats in. So, and then Johnny, well, the thing for me is looking through the numbers. Yes, he's got scores between 30 and 40. He's only batted 50 balls once in 10 innings. He's batted 50 balls once, and that, the franticness of the way he is. I thought the first innings here in Dharamshala was an occasional. I think the occasion got to him, 100 Test matches and everything like that. And I think in the second innings he looked a lot better, but still found a way to get out less than 40. And when you come to this part of the world, we'll come on to Ben Stokes in a second. Getting 0, 2, 4 below near double figures, you can kind of give that away. You can look at that and say, well, though I got out, and it's very, very difficult to start your innings on. It's criminal for me if you get out between 20 and 40. It really is, especially in this part of the world, because the responsibility as a top 6 batsman, you have to take responsibility. And unfortunately, I don't think enough batters in the top 6 for England, once they've get in that position, have taken responsibility. Johnny's probably guilty of it more than anybody else because of the amount of 30s he's got.
You're listening to our coverage here on talkSPORT 2 of the third day's play in the 5th and final Test match. It's lunchtime. England have slumped, I'm afraid. Another collapse to 103 for 5 at lunchtime with Joe Root on 33. And the likelihood is that England will concede the series on this third day. That's the likelihood. It hasn't happened yet. They've got 5 wickets left. Joe Root's still at the crease, but they are... they had a first innings deficit of 259, so they are still 156 runs away from making India bat again. I'm concerned that we're going to run out of time, so just, I mean, presumably Shoaib Bashir and Tom Hartley, everybody will agree their stock is up because they had no stock.
They were penny stocks, and now people are buying. So I think that's very fair. That's the easiest ones, isn't it?
Yeah. I think for me they're the highlight of this tour. Really are the highlight of this tour. We're coming here thinking, wow, how do we get 20 wickets? You know, if Anderson doesn't get a reverse swing, if India aren't frightened of Mark Wood's pace, where do we get 20 wickets from, especially when Jack Leach left? So to see Shoaib Bashir and Tom Hartley do what they did, I mentioned yesterday on commentary, you know, the mental fatigue that Tom looked as though he was going through, I can understand. Been there many, many times in the early part of my career, where you're walking out into the field and you're going, what am I doing? Where am I? Because it is just something alien to you when you go into an international environment. And I think all the mental energy that Hartley and Bashir's had to use to get them to this point. We've seen a couple of misfields from Tom Hartley, and I look at him and think he must be physically and mentally knackered.
He admitted this morning that he was tired.
And I've got no problem with that, because that's human. That's a human element. That's not anything to do with technique or anything. That is not played a lot of cricket, so I can certainly forgive that. I think the two of them have bowled brilliantly on this trip, especially when you're looking across the road and you're going Kuldeep, Ashwin and Jadeja all averaging less than sort of 25, and with Ashwin getting 500 wickets, Jadeja on the cusp of 300 wickets. To compare the two bowling attacks when it comes to spins department as they're comparing apples with oranges.
Okay, I'm going to finish with Ben Stokes, but let's talk about the three seamers that we've seen. We haven't seen Gus Atkinson, which a lot of people were looking forward to seeing.
Stock down. Is stock up?
Just no stock. Okay. Penny stocks. So Jimmy Anderson, Mark Wood and Ollie Robinson. I think it's fairly easy to say that Ollie Robinson has not improved his stock.
I don't think we need to talk too much about him. I think he's stocked. I mean, I'd be shocked if he bowls again in Asia, based on what we've seen so far. Mark Wood, it'd be interesting to see where Harmy goes with this. I didn't think Mark Wood bowled terribly, but also at no stage did I think he was a massive threat in this series. So I would have him as, if you're talking about bringing him back to Asia, for future series, I would say maybe, unless Sri Lanka, who always go out the fast bowling, I would say probably stock slightly down for Mark Wood. And Jimmy Anderson, it's probably about neutral, right? Like, if you told me that he took 10 wickets, an average of 33 coming in, I said that's fine. Maybe his economy is slightly higher than I thought. It's only 3, but a couple of times he got attacked, right? So India didn't seem as much of a threat, but I'd say he's about neutral. But yeah, I'd had Ollie Robinson massively down and Mark Wood just a little bit down.
I've been critical of Ollie Robinson, and I feel for him a little bit because coming into a test series, 5 test matches with no cricket under your belt, I think is nearly impossible. So I would imagine he'll come back in the summer after playing 4 or 5 games for Sussex. So let's see where he goes with that after being kicked again by people from the outside. I think Mark Wood has bowled as what I would expect him to have bowled. He's bowled with good pace. He's been effective for what England needed at that time. But has he been as threatening as what we expected him to be? No, I don't think he has. I don't think there's been as much reverse swing as we thought he was going to get for him to get, to be as potent as he wanted, as we needed him to be. And Jimmy's Jimmy. Jimmy, you know what you're going to get with Jimmy. I think you knew what overs you were going to get out of him. You knew what sort of threat you were going to get. India have tried to attack him, and the 2 or 3 times that they did attack him, he's come back and he's got wickets off the back of that. So I think all the seamers, I think Jimmy Anderson has bowled a bit like Jasprit Bumrah. I think Mark Wood has probably bowled better than Mohammad Siraj and Mukesh Kumar, I think it was, and Akesh Deep. I think they've been very, very similar when it comes to bowling seam in this series. I think that the difference for me, which we all knew at the start, was their spinners were going to be completely different to our spinners. But I think from a seam bowler's point of view, Jasprit Bumrah is unbelievable, and I think Jimmy Anderson has performed as you'd expect Jimmy Anderson to perform, wouldn't you?
Yeah, we just weren't going to expect Anderson to do what Bumrah's done in this series,
no,
right?
No.
And you're right. I don't think Wood's bowled all that much worse than the other combined Indian seamers, but he also hasn't had a huge positive effect on the games because he hasn't taken enough wickets. So, I think that's very fair.
All right, 2 to go before we come on to a couple of general questions. Ben Stokes and Ben Folkes. So, Folkes, let's go. I think that'll be the easier one. Stock up, stock down.
For me, it's always the same with Ben Folkes. It's not about Ben Folkes, the individual. It's not about the individual skill sets, whether it's keeping or the player around. For me, Ben Folkes, it's always about the other 6. If the other 6 perform, Ben Folkes is pickable. If the other 6 don't perform, Ben Folkes is not pickable. And that is so unfair on Ben Folkes. But the likelihood is Ben Folkes come back to England and doesn't play because England will want a 100 mecker, or they'll see a 100 mecker can keep wicket in England standing back to England seamers. That is not fair for me for Ben Folkes, because that's not judging Ben Folkes as a cricketer. But unfortunately, the reality of the beast is, with English cricket, they'll want a Johnny Bairstow at 7, or an Ollie Robinson from Durham at 7, or a Jamie Smith from Surrey, or a James Rue, who has emerged from nowhere in the last year from Somerset. One of them will bat 7, and Ben Folkes will end up playing for Surrey all season. And then he'll come back in for Pakistan when they go in October, November. It's not fair. So to judge Ben Folkes and say, well, he's took this many catches and he's got this many runs, I think it's immaterial. I think Ben Folkes' place in the side comes off the back of what happens above him. If England don't score runs, they'll look for the number 7 who can do. And unfortunately, that's not fair on Ben Folkes, but that's life.
Ben Folkes averages less than Bairstow at a strike rate of half of Bairstow. So when you look at it from that perspective, you'd have to say that at best it's neutral. His wicket-keeping was absolutely outstanding all the way through. And I think me and Harmy both think he will keep the next time they're in Asia. So I don't think he's cemented that spot, but it's pretty likely that he's going to get that. So I'd say he's probably exactly where we thought he was going to be at the end of this. And he hasn't made much of an impact, but he also has been very good with the gloves.
I think he's reality. I think he knows that as well. I think he's quite a level-headed guy who knows where his place in this group is.
He faced the 3rd most balls of any England player, by the way.
Behind Crawley and...
Crawley and someone else.
Joe Root, obviously, yes. Okay, yeah, Joe Root. Okay, finally, a word on Ben Stokes. It's obviously disappointing with the bat towards the end, but let's not forget that he made a 70 that held England together in Hyderabad, which contributed ultimately to them staying in the game rather than winning it. And disappointing with the bat? You've got the numbers there, Harmy. Well, you both have. But, you know, the fairy tale continues with a wicket, with his first ball for 9 months, which is extraordinary. I'm interested to know whether you think that he might have any second thoughts at all about this new, about going to India and being brave and bold and picking 3 spinners when nobody tipped that at all, and doing things a bit differently and still going down 4-1. He's impervious to criticism, is he, Harmy?
No, I don't think you can be. I think you have to be realistic. England have lost, and well, they will have lost by the end of today. They will have lost 4-1. So that's on his record. I think he's captained the team reasonably well. I think he's been proactive. He can't make decisions for people, and I think that's the thing that I would be questioning this group about playing this way in especially in India. The decision making from some of these players, that's got nothing to do with Ben Stokes. Ben Stokes and Brendan McCullum, I think, set the environment, and I think the environment they set is very good. And they tried to be as positive, and that teeters between the line of balance of positivity and recklessness, and I think we've seen a lot of recklessness in this series. Got 70 in the first game, he got a 40 in the second game, a 40 in the third game. His 2 low scores were in the game where the ball, I know Jarrod saying when he plays he plays a lot from back in the crease. I'd counter that and say if he was 10 yards down the wicket, he still would have been out because of the way the ball bounced in the 4th test. There was he'd be disappointed how he got out in that second innings there. So he's finished the series with a little bit of a whimper when it comes to with a bat. I still think his mentality is the right for this team. I still think his outlook of the way he wants his team to play is right for this group. I just think some of the players in this group could understand that message a little bit better and make their decisions a bit better.
On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.